Well, it's back once again. Secure your copy of the 2016 Blazer Dancers Fitness Pinup Calendar now for only $20. Pre-order online. Receive a free autographed Blazer Dancers poster. Don't miss this limited edition pre-order offer. Visit trailblazers.com/calendar and order now.
I know that we're not supposed to talk about this kind of stuff, MB.
We can talk about whatever you... I know. I usually go quiet.
But what I have to say is that calendar is really well done.
Did you see it?
Yes, I have seen it. It's
upstairs.
It's really well done.
Classy. And well done.
I guess I have to. I guess I need to.
I would partake.
I just gave you information on how to secure one. Pre-order.
Duly noted.
Joe Freeman from the Oregonian obviously is joining us. You all know the bearded charmer by now. He's a frequent guest on the program. Joe, this Trailblazers team, you heard Coach Stotts in the last segment. Tone and I were talking about this, and it's slippery slope. You can play this game, but when you look at so far this season, you look at the 6-9 record, and then you start going kind of, all right, well, are there games that they've I always do this in my mind anyway. What are the games? How many games have you won at the horn or stolen versus how many have you given away?
Right.
When you've given away more than you've stolen, that's a pretty good sign. And I think that is the case when you talk about the road trip and the Zebo tip-in, which took that game, and then the shot by Brewer off one leg, which sent that game to overtime, and Houston won. Have you been pleasantly surprised as far as in terms of seeing this team develop so far and what they've shown?
Even before the last two wins, I've said this a couple times in a couple of different venues, but even though they were in a 7-game losing streak, I thought that fans should be encouraged by what they had seen. I mean, this wasn't a team like the Lakers or the 76ers that's just getting rolled by teams. Every game they were more or less in it many times to the end. And like you mentioned there, a Zebo rebound put back after a Alec Crabbe block and a crazy Corey Brewer 30-foot shot there from 2 wins. The Detroit kind of debacle where clearly they outplayed them for 3+ quarters and then kind of faded down the stretch and gave that one away. A team that is typically rebuilding, as the Blazers are, they're not in games like this. You see more of the 76ers or more of the Lakers and more of these teams that really struggle just to compete. And so even though they were mired in that losing streak, I tried to encourage fans to be encouraged because I liked what I had seen. I liked the way they play. And there's more talent on this team than maybe they were given credit for heading into the year. And you're sort of seeing it all mold together and a lot of the stuff we had talked about in preseason about there being a lot of weapons, a lot of versatility, a lot of different ways that Terry can kind of use these weapons to exploit other teams. You're seeing a lot of that come true.
And maybe even, when you look at last night's game, and I tweeted this out after the game, you got a really clear sign watching that game between a defined vision and a team that doesn't know what it wants to be and is strapped with bad contracts, and they can't be what they want to be. Lou Williams you bring in, Brandon Bass you bring in, Roy Hibbert you bring in. Why? When you're clearly wanting to go young, but you can't play the young guys because you got to bring Kobe back in.
Right.
Lou Williams gets them back to within 3. He's got to come out. Portland goes on a 14-3 run and closes the door. And I think that's the one thing here, and credit to Neil O'Shea and his staff. They were ready for the deadline. We've talked about this before. They were ready for the LA deadline that where if it didn't happen, which it didn't, they were able to flip it over and not deconstruct and just move forward. So it seems like that kind of permeates the entire roster in that this is what we are, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to go down the road from here. And I think people underestimate the value of that.
You don't want to be a franchise that's year after year sort of floating above water trying to compete for the 8th seed. You either want to be a team that's rebuilding your roster to be a team that's trying to win it all, or a team that is in position to win it all. And obviously the previous 2 seasons, the Blazers felt they had enough talent to and proved to be one of the better teams in the West, so you go for it all. When that sort of crumbles suddenly with the departure of one of your best players, why piecemeal a roster together to maybe if you're lucky compete for an 8th seed? That's sort of what we're seeing. Well, I mean the Lakers aren't even competing for the 8th seed. I mean they're just a mess. They're just a mess. But and so going back to what we had talked about when I first sat down, it's when the Blazers are losing, what we're seeing is a young team rebuilding that's going through, the bruises and bumps that you're going to go through. They've been in games late. Young teams lose these games late. Defense has struggled, particularly in the fourth quarter in a lot of these games. That happens a lot when you play good teams. And it wasn't that they were just losing to teams. They were losing to good teams. They were losing to the same Memphis team that punked them in the playoffs last year. They lost to a pretty good team at Charlotte. What was the last? At Houston. You had they're kind of a mess, but you had the fired coach bump.
And the Spurs.
And the Spurs. And you were within 3 points of the Spurs with 3 minutes left before Manu went off. And so, again.
You had them tied at home with a few minutes left before they closed the door for them.
Right. So they're playing more experienced, better teams that are in crunch time beating them, that happens. Well, they're just not quite there yet.
The thing that stands out to me in those situations, it's not so much whether you win or lose, how are you losing? And it's not even just the games are close, it's that it's not the same pattern every single night. To me, when you lose the same way every single night, there's a bigger problem that needs to be addressed. But when you can play a game and you have 27 turnovers or 25 turnovers, you can look at after that game, you can look in the mirror and say, you know what? Turnovers killed us tonight.
We were sloppy tonight.
When you give up, when you're minus 18 in rebounds, you can say, we gave up too many offensive rebounds tonight, or we didn't do this, or we didn't do that. That's the thing that stood out to me, and that's why I was encouraging fans, is because they weren't making the same mistakes over and over again.
Sure.
They were feeling their way, trying to figure, okay, well, this doesn't work and this doesn't work, so we got to try this thing. And now we're starting to see, just like before when Myers was healthy, when everybody is healthy and playing the right way, this team is dangerous, almost scary to deal with. I wouldn't want to be a good team coming into Portland to face the Trailblazers, especially come second half of the season.
Well, they're definitely not going to be an easy out in any game. I mean, I think that's one thing we've learned about this team. They're going to play hard. And, I mean, look, we're in late November here. So this team is, if you count October and when they were here for September, they've only been together for a couple months.
And as Terry said in his interview, there's some combinations that have been on the floor, and guys haven't played together at all in games.
Right. And so you're still seeing the coaches work through that and try to find out what they have with this team. And they've played without Myers Leonard for the last 7.5 games too. So that kind of affects a lot of your pick and pop options and some of your long range, your outside shooting too. So, I've said this since the beginning of training camp. I don't think this team is going to compete for the playoffs, but I think they're going to be better than teams think. And I really like, for a young team, the variety of options and the variety of weapons you have on this team. There is a ton of athleticism, which we're starting to see, and just a ton of combinations that Terry and his staff can exploit. And when you have that and you have kind of that youthful hunger, I think what we've seen is what we can expect. There's going to be some outstanding stretches when the Blazers play better than anyone thinks. They pick up a couple wins that nobody expects, and they go through a solid week, and then there's going to be another week where they kind of take their lumps and lose a couple because, the hallmark of young teams is inconsistency. And until this team, goes through the fire together and until they kind of pay their dues and learn to win, that's what you're going to see is inconsistent play.
And to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago, you were mentioning teams that are constructed maybe to be fighting for the 8th seed, but not any better. And the teams that pop into my mind there are Brooklyn, even Dallas a little bit, whereas you're trying to just put a Band-Aid each year,
right,
and you're saddled with big contracts. You're deep into, you're right up against the luxury tax, and you're signing guys to contracts that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't, but you're trying to put a stop to things. And to be able to do what Portland has done quickly and flip the script really fast without a 2 or 3 year deconstruct of guys who aren't part of the plan, I think that's where the benefit really is with this team. And in terms of looking at the future and being positive about it, I don't know if Neil and his crew get enough credit for that plan of flipping it that quickly, and not having to go through the normal, because of the guaranteed contracts,
right,
shedding contracts over years to get to the core that you're then going to try and build with. They're already kind of there.
Yeah, I was it's been a couple months ago now, but I was talking to an agent, or maybe it was a while ago now. I was talking to an agent trying to get my head wrapped around with what is this team going to be like. And this particular guy was really impressed with what Neil was able to do, because a lot of these pieces, it's hard to envision how this is going to fit. You've got these bigs that you've heard of around the league, but you don't know a lot about. They're all young. I mean, shoot, when you change 9 guys on a roster, there's a lot of unknowns, and he was immensely impressed by Neil's ability to immediately pivot when things went south with LaMarcus, and then you decide, okay, well, we're done with Wes, we're done with Rolo, let's move on to plan B. And obviously Neil has been in Rook Aminu's corner since day one, since he drafted him. But, to go after Ed Davis hard, to make the Mason Plumlee trade like he did before that. It's just a lot of shrewd moves that were under the radar. And
there's one of them right there. When you, in terms
that
of,
was big.
Look, when you looked at Rolo last year in the playoffs, he wasn't the player that he was his previous 2 years. It was the end of the second year, but something was off. And
look at those numbers and that comparison. And we don't bring up the bottom number very often. Okay?
That bottom number's big.
Yeah.
And not only that,
we don't talk about it, but look at that.
If there was an age on both those players, too, they're both Rolo's not old by any means, but Mason's in his third NBA season, and NBA guys, bigs particularly, are supposed to take years to develop. And what we're seeing him this good in year 3?
That was going to be my question. Is he better offensively than you anticipate? He certainly surprised me. He's got a great left hand. He finishes soft around the rim, and now his free throw shooting is on par with what the rest of his game is.
And he's just smart, and he's got a good chemistry with Dame already in the pick and roll.
Oh my God, his passing is. Terry said he told me early in training camp he's the best passing big man he's played with him. He's coached in Portland, and we saw it from the first quarter of the first preseason game. That backdoor cut to Dame he might end up with 40 assists this year off that alone, maybe more.
Well, and I've talked about this a lot during games, and fans' eyes probably glass over because I've said it so many times. They don't mind him rebounding and taking off at the basketball, and there aren't very many big guys that you can say that about. But when he's done that, he's rarely made a bad decision. He's rarely turned it over. It doesn't always turn into a 3-on-1 bucket at the other end, but he takes it and takes off, and he's got good handles. And he came from Coach K's system. He's a smart guy, so that's one of the shrewd moves that is certainly paying off for the Trailblazers so far. We'll take a break here on the Trailblazers Courtside. Joe Freeman from the Oregonian here sitting in with us. Back with more right after this.